Ezra and Nehemiah. We are starting a new study on the Sabbath School lessons for quarter 4. And it sounds like we'll be studying Bible books, but we're also looking at two historical figures as well, Ezra and Nehemiah.
And from the title, we see that the lives and the work of those two prophets will be the object of our study for the next quarter. They bring, both of them, a message of restoration, a message of reformation. However, optimism is not how those two messages will end, as the lesson points out.
Life is complicated, the author says. The perspective and the approach to the study are important. And in the introduction, there were certain clues that resonated with me. It's about real life, where no good goes unpunished. Even close friends and allies can turn against you. It's a struggle. But we also see that even though in this story, his people were narrow-minded, disoriented, distracted, and stubborn, God fulfilled his promise. Some important points while looking at us today as well.
Yeah. Ezra is battling with one of the biggest challenges a prophet can have. How can the nation of God overcome sin in their personal life and then follow the already revealed God's will? Where does the real powerful change come from? And at the same time, the knowledge of God carrying out his plan regardless of the nation's disobedience brings comfort and brings assurance that God is in control.
The temple was already reconstructed and dedicated, but the people were not in a good state. Jerusalem had to be restored. The administration, the national autonomy, paving the way for the Messiah. Reformation is a painful process, but something that we also need today very badly. And we can get discouraged while looking at the reality around us. Hopefully we can learn something from this study. Let's jump in.
Making sense of history, Zerubbabel and Ezra. Yes, we are trying to make sense out of history as much as it is possible because we're talking about thousands and thousands of years back. Israel was exiled and punished by God in Babylon. A prophecy recorded in Jeremiah was giving them hope that they would be brought back to Jerusalem after 70 years. How did this happen? When did this happen, and who were the people involved in this whole ordeal? All those questions find answers in today's study.
The books of Ezra and Nehemiah were written to convey a message and not to be history books. This is why chronology is not the focus nor the purpose. However, to properly understand the message, we need to understand the historical context. Without it, reading the text can be confusing. The lesson takes special attention to list the chronological order of the Persian kings involved in this time frame. They are also in the study guide, so please refer to it when needed. It helps when trying to understand and link the events.
The year is 537-536 before Christ, and the prophet Daniel has discovered God's promise to bring his nation back to Jerusalem after 70 years. However, at first there were no signs whatsoever that this will happen anytime soon. So Daniel was worried. He was discouraged. He was confused. Is prophecy real? Is God trustworthy? Until God moves Cyrus, the king of Persia, and a command is issued to release all the Jewish captives in Babylon. A group of 50,000 people, led by Zerubbabel, returns back with gifts, finance for the purpose to rebuild the temple of God. What an amazing event, and what an amazing march of faith, and what an amazing prophecy. And who's behind all of this? An amazing God. And this is the first return of exiles.
What a big lesson this is for us. Expecting God's return and looking at the prophecies, trying to figure out how it's going to happen. God's ways are amazing, and it's not for us to figure them out. So Zerubbabel is leading this first group and they are restoring the temple. It's not an easy task, but it gets done. However, there is no city, there is no infrastructure for the temple to get in good use, as there are no conditions for the people to live there. Reformation, restoration, it's not just about one or two things. It's not just even about the temple. In the last few years, we hear a lot about this theme in our churches. But do we realize what it means, what it is involved? It's a big process.
About 90 years and some 5 kings later on, after the first group of exiles left, a smaller group of about 5,000, 6,000 people are commissioned to go back to Jerusalem. Their appointed leader now is Ezra, who gained the favor of the king of Persia, Artaxerxes. Ezra was a descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses. Hence, he was a priest. Also, we learned that he was a skilled scribe in the law of Moses, who had prepared his heart to teach the statutes and the ordinances in Israel according to the law of the Lord. Ezra was the one who led the second return of exiles from Babylon.
Ezra seems a very high-profile figure, trained as a priest, working as a scribe with high Persian education, but above all, a very spiritual guy. Not only with high credentials, but with solid and deserved credibility.
It's interesting what could have been the motive that moved King Artaxerxes to issue a decree in which very practically and very formally he empowered Ezra to bring gifts, gold, silver from his treasures, but also from the treasuries of the region beyond the river. And what's interesting also is that he appointed Ezra to organize the social system, but even more importantly, the judicial system in Israel. It seems like that the king was aiming at building the order and the prosperity and the well-being of the nation of God. And what's interesting is that the lesson asks the question, does that necessarily make him, King Artaxerxes, a believer of God, a worshipper of the God of the universe? No such record is left behind. Probably or most likely a political stability in the region was his goal, or some sort of spiritual protection from the anger of the neighbor nation's God, who always need to be appeased with gifts. Regardless of the reason, what motivated King Artaxerxes, God always arranges his plan to be carried out.
So far, we learned a bit about the historical context when Ezra and Nehemiah lived and worked. This lesson, though, is focused more on Ezra. We looked at Ezra's background and mission when he sent to Jerusalem to lead the restoration of the city and technically to the nation of Israel, which mission was to testify about God and his character. We were also fascinated on how God opens the hearts of big pagan figures to accomplish his plans.
The lesson ends with a big stress on the importance of education when it comes to the will of God. And Ezra, somewhat like Moses, was educated in the most prestigious schools of Babylon. However, there is a strong language in his book that shows his priority and preferences on learning and teaching the statutes and the ordinances of the law of the Lord. Let's be real. We're not always going to live in a safe Christian environment in our lives. We're not always going to be in Christian schools or Christian offices and businesses. And even some of us would not even going to be living in a Christian-dominated countries. However, we can always consciously search and make choices what kind of philosophy and belief we want to go after that will bring meaning and purpose and satisfaction in our life. We, as Christians, can be strong in our confidence that is built on God's promises and God's principles and God's leadership, regardless of where we live in this world.
Education is such a big topic, especially in the context of leadership, as is with Ezra, Moses, and many others. we should always strive for knowledge. Science and good education in any area today are very important. But as Ezra found out, without God, there is no real satisfaction in all that. We remain thirsty, hungry, and unsatisfied. Ezra prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it. We are just starting this study, and we will continue next week with Nehemiah.